What's good, boys? Welcome to Based or Cringe, where we take a look at Commander Precons and ask the question, are these decks based or are they cringe? If they're based, we go through a simple upgrade guide to make these decks better. If they're cringe, we find a more suitable commander to substitute the face commander for in order to make the deck good. And today, we are covering Disa the Restless or Graveyard Overdrive from Modern Horizons 3. Disa the Restless is 2 black, red, green, 5 mana for a legendary 5/6 human scout creature. Whenever a Lurgwith permanent card is put into your graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, put it onto the battlefield. And she also has, whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a Tarmogoyf token. And of course, a Tarmogoyf token is just you know Tarmogoyf. Do we really guys know what Tarmogoyf is? This is easily the most talked about precon from the whole set of the 4 from MH3. Because, you know, it's got always cool callbacks to Jund. Look, Bloodbraid Elf. Wow. Eternal Witness. Amazing. Terminate. I think there's a Cold Gods command in here. There's a Bituminous Blast for some reason. There's a Faithless Looting in here, too. Oh, my goodness. It's got always cool Jund callbacks. Wow. I'm not gonna lie. The deck is cool. But unfortunately, Wizards could have been way more based and added a bunch of Thoughtseize effects. So despite being advertised as this like Lurgoyf Kindred deck, there's only 7 Lurgoyfs in the deck. So everyone looks at Disa and thinks, oh yeah, you should be playing self-mill and be milling all these Lurgoyf cards and cheap out into play. But there's only 7 in the deck. Otherwise, you're kind of just this like Jund mid-range commander deck, which isn't really super good. Disa herself does actually serve as a great finisher because if you have creatures that can connect with every opponent, you can get 3 Tarmogoyfs a turn, which can very easily be like 15 power return if you have enough card types in graveyards to make them big and beefy. For main abilities, what everyone tends to focus on, the deck itself just kind of has a lot of weird things going on. Like there's a Siege Gang Lieutenant. This is just like a goblin that makes 2 goblins every turn, but only if you have your commander, which is strange. Like the deck kind of acts like it wants to be Reanimator, but there's only actually 2 cards in the whole deck that help you bring things back to the battlefield. One being Deadbridge Chant, which is this super slow 6 mana card that if you're lucky enough with these on the field, you might get some Goyfs because milling 10 is a pretty hefty amount, but you also might just get nothing, which would suck. And then there's also a Junji the Midnight Sky, which is just this 5 mana 5/5 flyer that does nothing until it dies. Not very good, I have to say. Really, there's not enough Lurgoyfs to help trigger Disa consistently. So real quick, let's take a look at what upgrading Disa the Restless would look like if we were to try to upgrade this deck. Alright, so we're here with our Disa the Restless Precon upgrade. These were all the cards we cut. All of these cards pretty much either just didn't do enough, were too expensive, or just kind of didn't really fit the theme of the deck. Guruk is too expensive. Zeotor is too expensive. Gluttonous Hellkite, we definitely do not want to be sacking our Lurgoyfs. You may have noticed I also cut Masquerade and Nexus as well. I understand that, Nexus makes every creature in your deck a Lurgoyf, and therefore you start going turbo mode with Disa. I honestly don't think adding this is that good. Yes, I understand the payoff is massive and huge so you get on the field, but I still don't think it helps satisfy the need for Lurgoyfs. Like, do you want your commander to be this do-nothing card unless you manage to pull 1 card in your deck? I don't think so. That sounds really boring to me. You can play it if you want, but personally, I think it just feels a little too one-trick pony-ish for me. All these cards are just either too expensive or they don't really fit within the theme of our deck. The biggest problem the Disa deck faces is that there just aren't enough Lurgoyf permanents to trigger her consistently should you be playing self-mill. So we obviously gotta try and pump those numbers up. The problem is there's only actually 3 other Lurgoyfs the deck doesn't play that you can even run, or that are even playable. Nethergoyf, Tarmogoyf, and Terravor. Terravor, I'd say, is the only other playable one besides Goyf and Nethergoyf, because everyone plays fetch lands. Terravor can very easily be a 3 mana 7/7 if everyone just plays enough fetch lands, and this deck has a fair number of them as well. And then of course Tarmogoyf and Nethergoyf are just, cheap creatures that just can get big based on card types. So that brings us to 10 as opposed to 7. That's still not enough. So now we have no choice but to resort to playing changelings to fulfill the Lurgoyf requirement, which is super cringe. And even then, like, they fall off pretty hard. There are some good ones, like Chameleon Colossus can be a pro-black Lurgoyf. Web Weaver Changeling can gain you some life, I guess. Mass Vandal is some removal on a Lurgoyf permanent. Tarian Mauler is basically a Managorger Hydra that just doesn't have trample. But after these, we start to fall off really hard. We have to resort to playing like Changeling Titan and Changeling Berserker. Lurgoyfs that just are generic bodies and don't really give us too much utility like Pyrogoyf does or Necrogoyf does. So these are expensive Lurgoyfs that just don't really give us the same small mana for big power bonuses that Tarmogoyf or Nethergoyf give us. Which is like, is this even that good? Right? Like, you're playing this Lurgoyf deck and your reward for building around your commander super hard is just getting some occasional power if you mill a Changeling or Lurgoyf. Not to mention that this deck literally almost doesn't work if Disa ever dies. So now we gotta put so much emphasis on trying to keep Disa alive. Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots, Revitalize Repass is MDFC that can give Disa indestructible if we need to. We also have some utility with Buried Alive. This card was what everyone talked about the most with Disa, because if you cast this, you can just go and grab any 3 Goyfs you want and just cheat them into play with Disa, which is amazing. There's also Chainer allowing us to discard Goyfs to cheat them into play and then cast other creatures from our graveyard, giving us some nice synergy there as well. And then there's just some generic, you know, utility like Skull Prophet being ramp and or mill, Soul Harvest being some decent card draw, and then Profane Tutor because it's a cheap tutor that every black deck can play, and I personally am a big fan of it. Personally, this deck to me just feels very clunky. You're playing all these weird cards that don't really do enough, and even in the circumstance where you actually can make them work with Disa, reward just isn't really that worth it. Getting a 7/7 that requires you to champion a creature when it comes into play just isn't that good, I don't think. If Disa dies, if your opponent removes Disa, this deck just doesn't work. You can bank up on all the protection spells you want, missing out on, you know, playing other actually fun cards. So, between the lack of Lurgoyfs available, having to rely on Changelings, and the fact that this deck really falls apart very fast if you can't keep Disa on the field, I gotta give Disa a cringe. SMH, bro, SMH. So now we have to ask ourselves a question of, what's a better substitute for Disa? We want to keep our Tarmogoyf theme, we want to keep our self-mill theme. Who would be a good substitute for that theme? What do Lurgoyfs tend to like? Well, they like to have card types, right? They care about card types in the graveyard. So having a deck that cares about card types is a pretty big deal. Having a commander that would help us mill to turn on our Goyfs and have them be big pretty fast, pretty good too. Who would be a good fit? You know what? Wizards actually gave us a really cool alternative commander in this precon with Karam the Undertaker. He gives us mill, he gives us card advantage, and he gets really big based on the biggest power of creatures in your graveyard. I gotta say, he sounds like the perfect substitute for Disa in this deck. So now we have this different build of the Disa deck with Karam the Undertaker. For those of you who don't know, Karam is 4 mana for a 0/5 legendary human warrior creature, but he is +X+O, where X is the greatest power among creature cards in all graveyards. Whenever Karam attacks, each player mills a card. During each of your turns, you may play a land and cast a spell from among cards in graveyards, so I've put them from libraries this turn. Karam is honestly kind of like a fat dark confidant to me. He flips the top card every turn, and you can play it that turn. He's a 0/5, so I think he can attack pretty confidently. He can get an insane amount of power, honestly, if you get lucky with the mills, or you just play a Death Shadow turn 1 and it dies instantly, making him a 4 mana 13/5, which is just insane in this deck. We mostly made the same kinds of cuts we made with the Disa deck, where all the cards either just are too expensive, or they just don't do enough, or don't fit the theme of our deck. There are some exceptions this time. Graveshifter we cut because this is just... Gravedigger is not a playable card in today's world. We know Lurgoyfs care about card types, right? Is there any other way we can try to benefit from having this card type emphasis theme? Actually, there is, with Delirium. Delirium is a mechanic from Innistrad where if your graveyard has 4 more card types in them, you get additional benefits. So Traverse the Overwall, right? 1 mana green sorcery, search for a basic land, but if you have Delirium, it search for a creature or a land card. So we can play all these super playable Delirium cards like Unholy Heat, Dragon's Rage Channeler, Consuming Blob, Bloodbraid Marauder, and Grim Flayer. These cards that just get really good benefits if you are playing a Delirium type deck, further reinforcing our card type emphasis theme with all of our Lurglyphs and whatnot. We still add in our Tarmogoyfs and our Nethergoyfs to help fulfill that Lurglyph theme. We also play some creatures that just get really big if you have lots of creatures in your graveyard. Splinter Fright can be a massive beater. We are still pretty heavy on creatures as well. So, all these cards that care about having creatures in graveyard, you know, like Lurgoyf specifically, Mortivore as well, should still be able to get pretty big with all your mill effects. We added Ripples of Undeath as a way to just give us card advantage and mill as well, helping us kind of serve as double duty, because the Disa deck actually did suffer from a pretty heavy lack of card draw problem. I only counted 7 in the Precon list, which is a little low for my taste. We also add a couple of battles to help ensure we can reach those card type numbers enough. Only playing 2, Invasion of Chandelar serving as some good recursion, and Invasion of Fiora serving as just a great modal board wipe. We still play Buried Alive because Buried Alive lets you go and grab, you know, your new Lord of Extinction, turning Karam into a, I don't know, a 35 or something insane like that. You can go and grab your Death Shadows and all that. And we still play Disa in the 99 because, as I said before, I still do think Disa is a great finisher, and if you get her on the field, you might still be able to cheat some Goyfs into play if you are just a little lucky. We also play Urza's Bauble and Mishra's Bauble. These are 0 mana artifacts that replace themselves. The only purpose they serve is to help enable Delirium for us. And again, it's just a cheap way to get extra card types into the graveyard. So it's a 0 mana card that does not put down card advantage and helps get an artifact in your graveyard. Just again to help turn Delirium, fuel your Goyfs, all that stuff. We play Garruk's Uprising, which will give all of our big Lurgoyfs trample, as well as give us some card draw every now and then for our big creatures we're playing as well. Seal of Primordium is basically a disenchant, but it's an enchantment, which once again helps fuel our card type strategy. Already, I like this deck much more than Disa. We're not held back by relying strictly on the Lurgoyf creature type. Karam doesn't have to survive at all for the deck to function. Karam can just be this decent value piece in the command zone. Like I said, he's basically just a fat Dark Confidant giving you a card draw every turn, as well as being a pretty big beater late game. I think the card type emphasis gives this version of the deck a really unique flavor and spice that you wouldn't really see in many other pods. Overall, I think this build is just much more flexible and much more fun to play, and there's much less that can go wrong. If Karam dies, you're okay with that. You are not happy if Disa dies, because Disa needs to be in the field for your cheat Goyfs into play. Disa costs 5 mana, Karam costs 4. And you can still play Disa in the main deck just as a great way to help close out the game once you have a decent variety of creatures. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Base or Cringe. If you are interested in seeing the deck lists, they will all be in the description down below, so check them out if you want. If you enjoyed this episode of Base or Cringe, let me know in the comments. It would be great to know if you all actually would like to see more Base or Cringe content in the future. So, yeah, thank you all for watching. I will see you all next time. Disa, you are cringe. Get out of here. Get out. Bad. Bad commander.